Too many people associate retirement with the end.
I figure it'll be a little bit of a transition to try to slow down a little bit.
The number one question I have about retirement is having enough money to last.
In my mind, you start to look at it, that's an opportunity to do more of the things you want when you want to do it.
Make it financially able to do things that I enjoy.
Party.
Just financial security and enjoy my family.
More people need to go into it with their eyes wide open, understanding what is my plan, what do I want to do, and then how am I going to get there?
Will the rules change?
I have no real specific plan.
I'm planning for what the status is right now. I just hope it doesn't change drastically.
Welcome to the RetireTastic Show with JoAnn Regan, powered by the Retirement Income Store and brought to you by Financial Security Group of Arizona. In retirement, it's all about income. And today, you'll hear ideas, concepts, and strategies designed specifically to generate reliable retirement income. Now, here's the host of the RetireTastic Show, JoAnn Regan.
I wanted to start today's show with a quick story and a quick question. I don't know how many of you can relate to this, but many years ago when I was starting out in the financial services industry, I used to do quite a bit of traveling on the road, traveling through neighboring states. And a lot of times I continued driving when I most likely should have stopped. I was tired, but you just wanted to get to your destination, so you pushed just a little bit further, not necessarily falling asleep, but maybe not as alert as you ought to be. So welcome to the RetireTastic Show, powered by the Retirement Income Store. This is JoAnn Regan, your host, where my goal is to help you have a fantastic retirement. So as I was driving, sometimes I would be tired and I could feel myself swerving a little bit side to side. And then sometimes you have a knee-jerk reaction to get back on the road. So then when you do that, you kind of swerve to the other side of the road and then you have to balance. And one of the interesting things to remember when you're driving on major highways, there's a ditch on both sides. So your goal is to try to avoid a ditch on one side, not to swerve really hard and fall into the other ditch, because that doesn't really help you. In fact, that's really actually how head-on collisions are created. So while it's not enough to try and avoid going in one direction simply to end up in the ditch on the other side, that led me to this idea when I was speaking to people around financial matters. And many times I find that people fall into one of two camps. People end up in a situation where they're on one side of the ditch or the other. And this is probably true in a lot of different scenarios created by finances, but one of the areas that I see this a lot is in their preparedness, their feeling of preparedness around their retirement. So let me share a quick story with you. About a week ago, I was doing an initial consultation with someone and I'd never spoken to them before. I believe they actually found me through some internet searching, where they were doing one of those quizzes and they were trying to get matched up with a retirement planner. And I guess I kind of ended up on their calendar, or they ended up on mine as well. So I called the gentleman and I did my normal introduction. I reminded him that we were scheduled to speak today, but before I could actually get 2 words in, he cut me off in actually a very nice way, because some people do it rudely. And he said he didn't want to waste my time, that he really wasn't looking for a financial planner. He had just clicked on the button by accident and all he wanted was the report. He didn't want to speak to anyone because, in his words, he felt like he was doing everything just fine and he felt he was happy with the results that he had so far, so he didn't need any assistance. Now, for those of you who know me, you know I'm not very pushy, so I don't push back. And if somebody feels like they don't need my help, then I'm not going to try to convince them, because if they think they're okay, then that's totally fine. And that's basically what I told this gentleman. I told him that if he changed his mind in the future, that he could always contact me, and I would be more than happy to share information with him and help him do some analysis to see where he was. But as I was hanging up the phone, this thought crossed my mind. How does he know? And that's the title of today's show. How do you know? Not saying that he's wrong. For all I know, he could have been 100% totally secure and well on track to reach every financial goal that he had. But the big question was, how does he know? I think this gentleman was saying subjectively, maybe because he wasn't currently experiencing any problem or any pain from a financial standpoint. He just assumed that meant that he wouldn't, that in the future he was going to be just as comfortable as he is today. But I did sense that he really didn't have an analysis or finding that he was leaning on to justify that rationale. It was just a feeling. And so many times when I speak to people, I hear the same sentiment, that they generally feel like they're okay, and to them, that's enough to give them the confidence to safely move forward, even though in reality, we don't know if they're okay or not. So the question that I want to ask you is, why do we do this? Not just in finances, but in many aspects of our life. Why do we just go off of feelings? Why don't we look at data and analysis? And I want to caution against this because we're going to talk a lot about many aspects of how you need to look at things and how you need to evaluate your finances. Because remember, there are ditches on both sides. By the same token, you don't want to get mired in simply living your life by data. You can be too subjective, going simply off of how you feel, gut level reaction, and you can also go to the other side and be too data driven and never be able to make a decision because the data leads you in circles, or the slightest variance and the data has to change again and you are constantly recalculating. So what I'd like to offer you is the opportunity to meet with me and do a data analysis or an analysis of what's going on with your finances. That way you can kind of get a gut feeling about how things are going. You'll have some subjective information on how things are going, and I'd love to be able to help you with that. So if you're interested in meeting with me, why don't you give me a call at 1-800-FSG-7890. Again, that's 1-800-FSG-7890. So today I'd like to caution everyone and say, my goal in having this conversation with you is not to say that you're not okay, and it's not to interject fear. So while I don't really want to erode your confidence, I will say that a lot of times when I'm speaking with people, I realize that they're not interested in having an analytical conversation because they don't want me to erode their confidence that they have so far. And I think that's really grounded in fear in things that they may not even realize. We all sometimes develop a mindset that kind of tends to form where we feel like we can handle anything that comes up. We feel like we don't ever have to plan. We don't need to strategize because as long as we're okay, even if something weird happens, we'll adjust on the fly. We're going to be just fine. But at the same time, there's this idea that we never want to be in a situation where we feel like the decisions we've made are openly exposed and where shame might come in. Really, if you think about it, isn't finance an area where a lot of emotions oftentimes do come in? You think about the way that our society has taught us to identify or want to be people that are wealthy. We deem that kind of as a measure of success, something to be inspired to do. And we look at people that are homeless or people that have not prospered financially, and we think about those situations with respect to pity, and there can be a lot of shame that comes into that as well. So from a mental standpoint, the desire to want to protect ourselves emotionally and mentally drives us many times to not want anyone to know when we are struggling, especially in the area of finance. Now, the interesting thing is that you'll see this happen in a lot of different cultures around different things. For example, we can talk about the stigma associated with mental health in certain cultures. And in the U.S., one of the things that I would say, just to pin a contrast, is that we don't tend to have that stigma with physical health. When people have issues from a physical standpoint, we tend to look at it as just a bad thing that maybe they had in life. And there isn't a lot of shame associated with that individual for having to go through a physical ailment. And here's kind of an interesting statement. So you tend to have a similar net worth and income as your 5 closest friends. We tend to gravitate, whether consciously or subconsciously, towards people that look and feel and make us comfortable with where we are, in a sense, confirming the decisions that we made throughout our lives are good. So you'll find that the process plays out from a financial standpoint repetitively. It's one of the biggest deterrents from us actually progressing financially. If you listen to many people that have become successful financially, they'll tell you that one of the ways that they have become successful was because they made a lot of mistakes. And we can go even deeper in that when we think about how this plays out and manifests itself in the decisions it makes. And it has a lot to do with retirement preparedness and some of the mistakes that we see people make that they could easily avoid. So I want to elaborate a little bit about this concept of, are you okay? Not saying you're not saying that you are, but asking the question, how do you know? I told a quick story at the top of the show about a conversation I had with a gentleman who had gone through some online stuff to be matched with an advisor. And when I started to talk to him, he quickly backed off and said, no, I don't really want to talk to an advisor. I feel like I'm doing okay. I feel like I'm doing pretty good. And I didn't push back on the phone, because I didn't feel like if he didn't want to have an advisor, I wasn't going to push him. But as I was hanging up with him, I kept thinking, how does he know? Maybe he is 100% okay, but the question still remains, how does he know? How do you know? How do I know? If we don't have the ability to use good data, then sometimes we're just going off of a feeling, and I've seen it go both directions. I have to tell you, based upon my experience, anytime somebody just works off of a feeling, that's when things kind of have a tendency to go off. Our mind works to protect us, but then sometimes we make unfavorable decisions, and then what happens? We go off on a path that we weren't ready to go on, and then we've made a mistake. I'm sure at this point, a lot of you may be thinking, what type of analysis are you talking about? And the truth is, I really wish I could give you a specific answer, but it's really different depending on where you are and what you're trying to figure out. Literally, every single one of you could have a different question, and I could give you a different answer. But I will tell you that when I'm working with my clients, the main thing that I try to do is I try to make a plan based upon their requirements. I try to do the data based upon what they are needing to do. So if you're interested in having me do an analysis for you, why don't you give me a call at 1-800-FSG-7890. That's 1-800-FSG-7890. And let me take a look at what's going on with your plan, and let's see if we're going to get into the ditch or if we're doing okay. When we come back, we're going to continue to talk about this idea of how do you know.
The RetireTastic Show with JoAnn Regan airs Saturday afternoons at 1 and Sunday mornings at 8:30. You're listening to the RetireTastic Show with JoAnn Regan, powered by the Retirement Income Store. Have you missed any of today's program? No problem. You can hear all of the RetireTastic Show online anytime, 24/7 at yourfsg.com. That's YOURFSG.com. Remember the good old days when you could earn 5% on a bank CD? What if you could earn similar rates on interest and dividends to those CD rates? It's possible. And the income specialists at the Retirement Income Store can help you. We're a network of experienced financial advisors operating independently owned firms under the umbrella of the Retirement Income Store. This makes it simple and easy for you to find a retirement income specialist in your local area. Our advisors have helped hardworking Americans across the country invest and save for their retirement.
To learn more about the Retirement Income Store, call your local Retirement Income Specialist, JoAnn Regan of the Financial Security Group at 800-FSG-7890. That's 800-FSG-7890.
The Retirement Income Store, where retirees go for income. If you're preparing to retire in the next 10 years, this message is for you. One of the biggest sources of income may be how you claim your Social Security. That's right, how you claim your benefits. Do you know your full retirement age? Do you know how much your benefits may be taxed? Do you understand how to claim on an ex-spouse, or that you even could? For your free, no-obligation Social Security information kit, call 800-FSG-7890. That's 800-FSG-7890. Sure, you could spend hours and hours searching around online, only to find some generic calculators that may not factor in inflation, tax implications, your marital status, and hundreds of other variables. If you call or stop into the Social Security office, they, by law, cannot advise you on which claiming strategy is best for you. For your free, no-obligation Social Security information kit, call 800-FSG-7890. That's 800-FSG-7890. Or visit us online at yourfsg.com.
Whether this is the new normal or the new right now, our economy has changed. So what does this mean for your retirement? To keep you up to date and informed, we've put together a series of webinar events because even though many things around us keep changing, your need for retirement income will remain constant. For the date and time of our next webinar event,
call 800-FSG-7890. That's 800-FSG-7890. Or visit us online at yourfsg.com. Welcome back to the RetireTastic Show with JoAnn Regan, powered by the Retirement Income Store and brought to you by Financial Security Group of Arizona.
Welcome back to the RetireTastic Show. This is JoAnn Regan, your host, where my goal is to help you have a fantastic retirement. So on today's show, I've been talking about a very simple but powerful question of how do you know? My drive for the show is to highlight the need for analysis, the need for actual paper-to-paper rationalization about the decisions you're making and being confident enough to let somebody check your work in a good way to say, yes, you're doing a great job. So welcome back to the RetireTastic Show. This is JoAnn Regan, your host, and I am here to make sure that you have a fantastic retirement. So let's say we're specifically talking about retirement planning. And one of the key data reports that we utilize inside of our firm is a free report for retirement income. And those of you who have been listening on a regular basis have heard me talk about this because it's one of the best tools that we have been able to utilize. Not because of how complex it is, but because of how simple it is. You know, I'm not going to sit here and generate an 80-page report for you to look at that doesn't make any sense. What I'm going to show you is a report that maybe how you can turn your retirement into income and how that's going to work for you and make that your plan. So when we're talking about how do you know, sometimes we have to be subjective about this and we have to look at reports that are actually designed for us and designed for help us to meet our goals. So if I'm going to create a report for you on how to create retirement income, I'm going to make some major basic assumptions. I'm going to talk about your cash flow that you're looking for, your tax assumptions, Social Security, pension maximization, cash flow withdrawals, growth rates, and contributions, and try to get it boiled down to a one-page summary so that you can quickly identify where your gaps are. If you've never had one run or you've never done something like this for yourself, again, I'd like to offer it to you today. If you want to get a copy of it, just give me a call at 1-800-FSG-7890. Once again, that phone number is 1-800-FSG-7890. And I'll work with you to run a report so that way I can help you to get the information that you need to have a fantastic retirement. Just let us know that you're interested in receiving that free report on how to create retirement income. The good news on running that type of a report for you, it's not very invasive. I don't need your Social Security number. I don't need account numbers. I don't need your date of birth or anything like that. It's just one of those things that I'm able to do for you. It's not needing specific or privileged information. You just have to give me some information about, like I said, your income and your cash flow so that I can help you to figure out if what you're doing is going to meet your needs. And even if you've done some other planning, I would always encourage you to get a second opinion. The reason for that is I have found that specifically when it comes to integrating an investment with an income plan, this is one of the areas where the industry, I think, if I can be critical for a moment, is not doing nearly a good job as it used to. I think one of the reasons for that is because the industry, in a sense, is trying to maximize profits and oversimplifying the planning process. And so a lot of people and places and brokers and financial planners are putting you into these predetermined strategies that aren't really working for you and aren't working for most people in their retirement. I see many times when I'm doing evaluation that brokers are putting people into the same things over and over and over again, and those aren't necessarily being subjective or objective in helping the client meet their plan. One of the things that I found is that a lot of financial planners, they scale their business so that your plan is going to look very similar to your peers, because that way when you're talking to someone, everybody kind of looks the same. And even though there may be major differences between your situation and your friend's situation, what's going to happen is you're all going to get the same plan, and it's not necessarily going to work for your retirement. And you may end up utilizing a strategy that works great for them, but in your case, it could be very different and very detrimental. So that drives us back again to how do you know? Whenever you're choosing a distribution strategy or you're choosing an investment plan or an insurance plan or how to utilize your Social Security or pension or any other of a multitude of financial decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis, we go back to the question, how do you know? How do you know that it's the right plan for you? Have you ever heard the term rear view investing? Well, here's what that means. Many times people are trying to think about where they want to allocate their money for the future, and they start by looking at the past. They start by looking at particular investment to see how it's doing, and then they just say, well, it's performed good in the past, so I think I'm going to do this today. Now, I know many of you are thinking, well, if I don't look at how something performed in the past, how do I start to identify what might be better investments? So anyone who's ever done any real work from an analytical standpoint knows that you can't simply look at historical performance to predict what might happen in the future. In fact, every prospectus that you look at says that. Legally, they're required to say, even though we ignore that advice, that past performance is no indicator of future performance. So the way that you're looking at data could definitely be an educated guess, and that's really a lot of it. It's an educated guess on what's going to happen. But there are also a lot of other tools that you can utilize to try to analyze some of this data. And you've got to start by having an understanding of what you're invested in and what you own first. So for most of us to use data in terms of how we did during the accumulation phase when we weren't taking withdrawals, or for us to use data of maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3 years into retirement, and think that that really gives us the necessary information to accurately assess our preparedness for the next 10, 20, or 30 years, I'm going to tell you that that doesn't always work. I'm saying, how do you know? Just because there's that previous historical data, an analysis needs to be run for you so that you can be confident in what you're doing in the future so that your retirement is going to be successful. But I would also like to point out that there are people who have this nagging feeling that they're not going to be okay, which is quite the opposite of the person who is overly confident. And again, that's not usually grounded in analysis either. Many times when you stop and run the numbers, I have found more often than not that people are in a more favorable scenario than they thought they were. It's just that they didn't understand what was going on. Again, back to the thing, how do you know? How do you know you're okay? The only way you're going to know you're okay is to do an analysis. You definitely don't want to be overly confident, and you also don't want to be overly fearful. The question that you want to ask yourself is, how do I know? Everything that you think about, you want to ask yourself, what is that information based on? Even if you say, I think I can live off of $50,000 a year, no problem, I'm not going to run out of money for at least the next 30 years, the question should follow is based on what? What is that information based on? Again, I would like to offer you a free analysis. So if that's something of interest to you, please give me a call at 1-800-FSG-7890. Let me find out what you don't know. Or if you're doing great, I'll tell you you're doing great. And that question, how do you know, will be answered. That is all the time I have today for the show. So tune in next week and each week, and we'll continue talking about other topics related to retirement, finances, and wealth accumulation, all in an effort to help you. I'm JoAnn Regan, your host of the RetireTastic Show. Take care.
That's all the time we have for today. To speak with JoAnn off the air, call 800-FSG-7890. And for more information about our program, visit yourfsg.com. The RetireTastic Show with JoAnn Regan airs Saturday afternoons at 1 and Sunday mornings at 8:30. To speak with JoAnn off the air, call 800-FSG-7890. That's 800-FSG-7890. Or visit us online at yourfsg.com.
Investment advisory services offered by FSG Financial Services, Inc., a registered investment advisory firm in the states of Arizona, Nevada, and California. Sound Income Strategies, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisory firm, is a sub-advisor of FSG Financial Services, Inc. FSG Financial Services, Inc. and Sound Income Strategies, LLC are not associated entities. FSG is a franchisee of the Retirement Income Store. The Retirement Income Store and Sound Income Strategies, LLC are associated entities.